Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. I'm just going to wait a few more seconds to let people come in from the waiting room. And while I do that, while we wait just a few minutes, if people can share as they are coming in, what year in high school their student is. I assume a lot of people here have a high school senior, but I did see a few people who registered who have younger students, so it's always nice to have people here who are trying to get ahead of the information curve. And tell me if you even know what the CSS profile is. I got an email from somebody today that basically said, what is a CSS profile and why do I need to know about this? So, and that is basically what tonight is about. The official topic, as you can see, is everything you need to know about the CSS profile. So we will fill you in on that. I will just do a tiny bit of housekeeping while we wait for a few more people to roll in, and then we'll do some introductions and get started. This is technically a Zoom meeting, so you have all been entered muted and actually with your video off. If you can keep yourself muted, that's great. If you truly have a question you need to ask and you don't want to put it in chat, you can kind of raise your hand and unmute yourself. If you'd like to put your video on, we do love to see people's faces. It's just nice to know who's out there so that, we're not always talking to black squares. So, we live in the world of, Zoom and online events, but it's still nice to see people's real faces. So thank you, everybody. Yay! Who just put their videos on. Appreciate that. This is recorded, so you will get the link tomorrow. These are the types of sessions where you might want to definitely go back and watch them a few times because there's going to be a lot of information. And feel free to put your questions in chat. Kat, who I'll introduce in a second, is I'm going to be presenting, and so I try and manage as many of the questions in chat as possible. If I can give you a quick answer, I will. If it's something that a lot of people are asking, I'll bring it up to Kat. And definitely at the end, we go through and we look at all the questions and see, if we can answer as many as we can without staying here too late, because sometimes we go too long. So that's all I've got right now, and let's get officially started. So tonight I am with Kat Delgrosso from College Ave Student Loans. Kat, is this maybe like the fourth year we've done this? Definitely many years in a row.
It's definitely something that we seem to be just, we have to put it in our repertoire,
Yes.
It's information everyone needs.
Kat and I are a little bit comfortable kind of doing these things with each other and on the topic. And College Ave, a lot of you, actually, because you are parents of seniors, honestly may not know who they are, but you will probably get more familiar with them later in the year. They have been a really important partner with Road to College for quite a while. They've sponsored a lot of educational content like tonight. And later in the year, we do a lot more on the topic. So we actually have another webinar coming up on just financial aid in general, which is a little bit broader than just the CSS profile. And then in the springtime, we talk about student loans, federal student loans, private student loans. And College Ave is just been a wonderful partner helping to support all that type of content and helping to educate families like yourself on the whole process, which unfortunately has become more complicated than any of us would like to admit. Or we will admit it, but we wish it wasn't as complicated. So Kat, would you just tell a little bit about yourself and how long you've been with College Ave and what you did before?
Absolutely. So good evening, everybody. I've been at College Ave for almost 6 years. I've been in the field of financial aid related things in higher education for 30 years. So I used to work for a couple of schools. I've worked in financial aid at the University of Rochester and also at Syracuse University. as well. I've worked in student loans, really, I think actually, I don't know, over 15 years total. And I also, the reason why I enjoy doing this webinar and the other, financial aid related webinars is not only because I worked in financial aid, but I also worked directly with the CSS profile at both of those colleges. And I worked at the College Board for 7 years. So I worked directly with the CSS profile at the College Board. So I have a very in-depth,
And
history
sorry
with it.
to interrupt you, Kat, but just so people
Mhm.
may not even realize, tell the connection between the College Board and the CSS profile, because they might not even recognize, why that's
Yeah, yeah.
something to know.
The name of the CSS profile is kind of weird because it's like you don't think of like what does that mean? So it actually stands for College Scholarship Service. It's a name that was put in place on this form actually back in the I want to say, I'm forgetting the year, but it's like the 50s or the 60s. So 1960s, I mean. So it was way back then. It was College Scholarship Service, and it just never, it was basically, it's the College Board's product is the College Scholarship Service profile application form. I mean, it's they held on to that CSS part of it, that acronym back in the day. So, but they administer and create and wholly own the proprietary form, which is an application to apply for financial aid at a handful of colleges that are, quite frankly, some of the most generous colleges out there in terms of the amount of grant funding that they give out. So you will only need to file it if the colleges want it. Certain colleges that you're applying to may want it and some may not. So we'll go over that. But yeah, so that CSS acronym is just, don't even worry about it. But basically it's the College Board is who is administering it. And they're the same folks that do the SAT exam, the AP advanced placement, and as well as the PSAT exam as well for high schoolers. So, all right. I don't know if that helped or muddied the waters, but it's College Board. So
So there is the College Board, as Kat said, runs this, or is responsible for this form. Each college, obviously determines exactly what questions that they want and their formula. But at some point, as we'll get into it tonight, and as you actually have to fill out the form, it's connected to your student's College Board account, and you'll have to make an account there.
So shall I go ahead and?
Yes, let's get started.
Okay. Okay. So for tonight, we're basically going to go over some information about understanding what the sticker price is of the cost of attendance to attend a college or university. So I'll go through what those components are. We'll talk about how to fill out the profile and also common mistakes to stay clear of. So that's what our goal is for this evening. Okay, so applying for financial aid, the cost of attendance basically and the sticker price are essentially the same exact thing. So when you see the sticker on a brand new car in a lot, you see that there's things that are made that are added up to come up with that sticker price. It's the same thing with colleges. It's officially called the cost of attendance. And there's a definition behind the cost of attendance that colleges and universities have to include within that when they're posting their sticker price, as it were. And they also use that cost of attendance to determine it's kind of like, think about it like this. It's like, okay, well, what are all the things I'm going to need to pay for? And that includes things like books and transportation and things like that. It's not just tuition. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. So when the colleges figure out how much financial aid you're eligible for, they have to use that full cost of attendance or sticker price to figure that out. We're going to go through the types of financial aid applications tonight, the FAFSA versus the CSS profile and what is different between those two forms. The FAFSA, sorry, there's a lot of acronyms in the financial aid world, so you'll find that when you go to apply for school. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid and is required by all schools if you're applying for any kind of need-based and sometimes merit-based or talent-based, scholarships and that sort of thing. So free application for federal student aid versus the CSS profile. I'll go through what's different and some of the components that are different between the two forms. And then how the calculated family contributions work. How the financial need is determined, and kind of like the bottom line after that, the gap, if you will, that's left to pay on the family's part after all of that stuff gets calculated. And then we'll talk about if you have a unique story that you need to tell related to what we call special circumstances, I'll tell you how to approach that. And then I'm also going to touch on divorce separated families and how that comes into play when you're applying for financial aid. And then, of course, the avoiding the mistakes on the profile. So, so the sticker price. So it's going to vary at each school in terms of what the cost of attendance is. Obviously, I'm sure you knew that already. So you've got like two-year public schools. You've got 4-year public schools. You've got 4-year private institutions. They all, even within their individual sectors that I just named, they all have their own cost of attendance, obviously. The cost of attendance will increase every year normally. There are some schools that take pride in limiting tuition increases. Sometimes they will even freeze tuition to, if it's a certain, like during COVID, there were some schools that froze tuition for a couple of years even. So you may find that some schools don't increase their costs of tuition as much as percentage-wise as much as some others. But I would say on average, you should sort of plan for, just like everything else, like the cost of living just increases in general. And so I would say on average, the cost of tuition and fees increases on a probably 2 to 4% each year. So don't just keep in mind that when you are planning for, I know I saw the chat there at the beginning, there's a lot of folks on the call who are your senior year here, so you've got more of imminent decisions to make. Just know that when you are looking at schools this year, that you're looking at it for potentially a 2-year or a 4-year or maybe even a 5-year span. So it's not just a 1-year decision. I always like to tell families that. So the cost includes all kinds of basic things that are needed to attend school. Obviously, the tuition is included, but also food as well, of course. The cost of food that's taken into account includes 21 meals a week. So it is essentially covering the student within that full sticker price to say, okay, well, we know that the student needs to eat. I will fully admit, when I was in college, I am very sure I rarely went to breakfast at the dining hall. I often would, eat something that I had in my mini fridge. But nonetheless, the student still needs to eat. So they are taking into account meals, regardless of how those meals are, you end up, however the student ends up eating them, it doesn't matter. But I just want you to know that the schools are required by the Department of Education to include 21 meals per week in the cost. The cost also includes any licensures or certifications or first credentials that are required for the program. Those you probably would more likely see if it were like nursing programs, things like that. But just so you know, if there is a required cost, then they have to include it in the cost of attendance so that when they're figuring out your financial aid eligibility, it's using kind of like that top required dollar amount when they figure it out. So it's more fair to you, quite frankly, is sort of the bottom line of why I'm saying all of that. So these are the five main these are the five categories. Period. It's a definition that is written and required by the Department of Education that each college must include all of these items. So the tuition and fees is one category, food and housing, and that's if you're on campus or off campus, because the student still needs to eat and sleep regardless of where they're doing that. Books, course materials, supplies and equipment, personal expenses, and transportation. So the first two on this list are more fixed expenses that are charged by this college directly if the student is living on campus. Because like, for example, the food and housing, especially for like freshman students going in, are typically required to live on campus unless they're living at home with family members and commuting in. So the food would tend to be like the meal plan that's charged directly by the college. And then the housing would be like the cost of the dorm. And then as the student evolves over the course of, the second year in school, third year, fourth year, they may or may not move off campus, but certainly that just means that you're paying a landlord as opposed to paying the college directly. But it doesn't really matter. Food and housing have to be included in the cost. And those are average food and housing costs. So it may not be exact to your child, but it'll be an average amount that the college is using within the cost. The other items, number 3, 4, and 5, are really more variable expenses that you'll experience based on your family situation. So your books are going to vary per student. All those, personal expenses. That's the things like buying toothpaste and having the capability of having personal expenses throughout the academic year that the student would need to incur, just those sorts of things. Like I always say toothpaste just because that sort of resonates with people. Transportation would be things like you going back and forth to college, the student going back and forth to college at least a couple times a year. It's an average, and each college sort of does it on their average they could be doing it in different ways. Here's an example. So they could be looking at like, okay, your zip code is X and you're coming in so maybe you're coming in from California to a school in Pennsylvania. So you're way outside the radius of, so your transportation allowance might be a lot larger than someone who lives in the state of Pennsylvania in that example. And then there are some colleges and universities that might just use a flat average of transportation. They're not necessarily doing it based on, the radius outside of their school location. So that's the sticker price and what's included. So in terms of calculating need, the school is going to take the cost of attendance minus what is calculated actually from your free application for federal student aid, which is again the FAFSA. It calculates a number called the Student Aid Index. And if you join us on the other financial aid webinar that Debbie mentioned here at the beginning, when we have that, I'll go into this in more depth. But just so you know, there's a number that gets calculated from the FAFSA application that is essentially has to be used in the calculation of how much you need towards college. And so the cost, so this formula is the same whether it's really the FAFSA or the CSS profile. It's cost minus that number, that official number that comes on the federal form, and that equals your financial need. I think the big thing is to remember at the bottom of this slide my asterisk, which is that some schools will have, they're going to do different things based on, you're not going to get the same financial aid award from one school versus another one, because A, their costs are different, and B, they have different amount of money to spend. So for example, if you're looking to go to a 2-year public, community college, they, and a 2-year, or excuse me, I'm sorry, a 4-year public school, like a state school in your state, they may not have as much, especially the community college setting. Their costs are lower than like a 4-year private school, but they may not have as much to provide you in terms of grant funding. So they will source from federal and state sources, but they don't have as much institutional money of their own to provide to you. So so the school, it's going to be all over the map. Like when you get your financial aid award, none of them will match, but you're kind of hoping that your outlay of your final kind of bottom line, if you will be similar, and you can make a decision based on where the student would like to go, what their first choice is. And but there will be that time when like for those of you who are sitting in here and you've got seniors in high school, you're going to be sitting at the kitchen table somewhere months down the line here this year and going through the numbers and figuring out, okay, I've got, at this school, I'm going to have to pay $5,000. At this school, I'm going to have to pay $7,000. So you're going to have those conversations coming down the line here this year. Or for those of you with students who are juniors, sophomores, and so on, you can look forward to that a little bit later. But just know that they don't all match, but your need is calculated as such with this formula. Okay, so the financial aid application types I've mentioned, the FAFSA, so it's free. It is going to be, that's going to be basically required by everyone. There are a handful of schools that don't actually offer federal financial aid. They only have their own money and they don't require the FAFSA, but suffice it to say, 99% of the colleges and universities in the United States do participate in the federal aid program, and they will require the FAFSA for you to complete. So definitely count on that one. And quite frankly, there are some schools that they will require you to do the FAFSA, even if you want just merit aid, like academic scholarships too. So count on doing the FAFSA. It was simplified this year. It had some problems, but they'll be going into the second year of the simplified FAFSA this coming year. So I have high hopes that maybe it'll be a little smoother, but that will not be available until December 1st. Normally should be October 1, but they need more time. So they have announced that they are doing, and I say they, I'm sorry, I should say who I mean by that. It's the Department of Education. They have an entity called FSA, which is Federal Student Aid. So FSA administers the FAFSA, and they have announced that it will not be available until December 1 of 2024. So you cannot do that one soon, but that one you definitely want to mark your calendars to. You do not have to do it on that day. Just know that it's not available until that day. And you're just going to want to look at the deadlines of each school and figure out, okay, when do they need all this stuff I need to turn in? And it's going to depend on whether you're applying, for early decision or for regular decision and things like that. So just make sure you know what deadlines are being asked at each of the students' choices of colleges. And so moving on from the FAFSA, again, 12.1 for that one. The CSS profile is really why we're here tonight, and to tell you about this subset of schools that require it in order to provide, to calculate how much money they can afford to give you out of their institutional funding. So these tend to be there's actually like about 265 users I counted. It's usually, hovers around anywhere from 250 to 300 colleges and universities in the country who use this application. And so you might be asking, why do I have to do that application in addition to the FAFSA? And that is basically because those schools tend to have the most money to spend on you. And they want to figure out how to do it in the most equitable way, because they have much more endowed funding than some of those other schools that really just only need the FAFSA. So I hope that helps understand why. So again, there are thousands of schools that use the FAFSA, and there are only about, let's call it 300-ish that use the CSS profile. So it's a big difference. So I'm going to show you how to find out whether or not you'll need it or not. I'll show you that in the next slide. That is going to be available October 1st, and it always is October 1st, as long as I've been doing this. So they are on target for October 1, even though you cannot fill out the FAFSA for 2 months until 2 months later. There are fee waivers available to file the CSS profile. So again, the FAFSA is free, but the profile charges $25 for one school and then $16 for each additional school. But they offer fee waivers if to families who either are qualified for a fee waiver on their SAT exam if the student took the SAT exam, and then also the main thing that it's like if you qualify for like means tested benefits such as foods, like SNAP benefits and TANF, WIC, those types of things, those means tested governmental benefits for high need families, that's an automatic approval for a fee waiver. And then the College Board expanded their fee waivers a couple of years ago to also help families. Anyone who has an adjusted gross income of $100,000 or less will also qualify for a fee waiver. So if your adjusted gross income in 2023 is what this will be based on for 25-26 academic year, 2023. If your AGI was $100,000 or less, you'll automatically qualify for a fee waiver. And then the third type of financial aid application is an institutional form. So I was actually just talking with a school yesterday in Rhode Island that created their own institutional application for next year, because there was a lot of trouble with the FAFSA this year, and it really put people, if any of you have kids who are already in college, then you probably know this already. It was quite honestly a heck of a year. There were delays like no other. And so some schools, like the one I was talking to yesterday in Rhode Island, it's like, okay, well, we're not using the CSS profile. We really don't want to do that, but we created our own thing. So you might see that where school might need the FAFSA plus an institutional application. You're not going to see, I'm going to guess, you're not going to see somebody need all three of these things. That would be overkill. I'm pretty sure you'll not run into that. So, okay. All right, so the profile again is available October 1. This is a screenshot of it, of the front page of it. And because it hasn't launched yet, I had to give you a screenshot of showing you the 24-25. And you could technically still, so you're going to be seeing 2 different years at the same time. So make sure when you apply, starting October 1 of 2024 in a couple weeks, that you're picking the 25-26 year. Do not pick 24-25. Just make sure you're reading it. So I don't know if my guess is maybe they'll push that to the right and then 25-26 will be on the left. So just make sure you're clicking on the right year. Otherwise, you're going to have to redo the whole thing. So don't do that. But anyway, this is a link below. I know Debbie's going to send these slides out. That link there, at the bottom of the screen, does have some helpful tips in terms of how to get started and how to prepare as you're sitting down to file it. So I would recommend that if you feel like you need a little kind of, if you're feeling overwhelmed before you get started with it, that'll help you kind of just get organized. Okay, so this is a screenshot from the website itself. I know, Debbie, I said maybe I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go over here and show you. So if you are on the site itself, CSS profile .org actually will get you there. There is a link right here in the middle of the page that says check participating schools and scholarships. This is really giving you the sense as to who needs it. So of the 265 that I counted in here, for this year anyway, you could do a sort on here for, you know, DC, Washington, DC, by state, basically. You can also do a sort by, you can just go and look for the college that you want, and see if it's listed. 9 times out of 10, or really 9.9 times out of 10, the colleges that need it are listed. However, I will tell you that technically a college can opt out from showing themselves on this list, but they might still require it of you. So it is best to look at their website and see what they want from you, and don't fully rely on this just in case. And you may say, well, why wouldn't they want to show on that list? I'll give you an example of that. I when I worked at the College Board, we did have a pretty prominent Ivy League school that didn't want to show on there because they only needed it for a certain population, and so they didn't show it there. But if they needed it from a student, they would tell them directly. So anyway, I do think this is quite helpful. What you're going to do is look under the column that says CSS profile for domestic students, or CSS profile for international students. If you're a student who is not a US citizen or a permanent resident on this call, you would go here and, you know, take a look at, you know, the schools that need it or don't need it. And then for those folks who are in a divorce separated situation, or if you were never married, you may have to fill out, that other biological parent may have to fill out a separate CSS profile as well. And so you can see the yeses and nos on that list as well. And then IDOC is the last column on the right, and that stands for Institutional Documentation Service. And that basically is if a college wants to use the College Board's IDOC service to collect your tax returns and your W-2 forms and other types of things like that, it'll say yes here. So like Amherst College is a yes, 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 yes across the board. They do require like the CSS profile for all those groups, and they also are an IDOC school. If it's an IDOC school, just so you know, I'll touch on this because I'm here. I will say having a school that uses IDOC is actually very handy for you, because then you're only sending tax information to one place. You're uploading it to the College Board, and then they're disseminating it out to whichever schools needed it on the list. So it actually saves you time if the school uses IDOC, and they don't charge you for that. You don't get charged for that. So, okay. Going back over to, so this is just a screenshot of that, but I'd like to show the real website. Okay, so here is kind of where the rubber meets the road here, in terms of what is requested between the two forms. So the FAFSA, you can just see by my chart that FAFSA actually requires less information than the CSS profile. The FAFSA was simplified, and it can be completed in as few as I heard yesterday at a conference I was at, 10 minutes. Or so, I mean, technically, if all goes well, you could complete the FAFSA very quickly. I think 10 to 30 minutes is probably normal now with the new simplified FAFSA that came out.
And the fact that, you know, a lot of the data is being pulled automatically from the IRS system, which was another major change.
Major change. Thank you, Debbie. So basically you don't have a lot of data entry to do on the FAFSA. It's kind of come down to closer to 50 questions versus over 100. And the 50 questions, I'm counting things like first name, last name, social security number, and, you know, easy stuff. So the FAFSA definitely will not take you as long as if you've ever done one before. It won't take you as long. Hopefully they'll work out all the bugs that they had this year on it, because it was, as I said, a bit of a doozy of a year, but surely year 2 will be better for the new FAFSA. Now, the CSS profile, on the other hand, you will need to sit down and probably need, I would comfortably say you would need an hour probably to go
Yes,
through that.
Aquaman football.
So,
Um,
Kat, actually somebody asked, and I couldn't remember this, can you get a printout of like what you, like, of the CSS profile so you can look at it beforehand?
so if you go to the link back here, they may advise you at that particular link. If at minimum, go to cssprofile.org and kind of start at that main link. There is there's a tutorial in there. And it will not print you a PDF of the form, but there is, they do give you some information ahead of time in terms of like what you're going to be seeing on the form. It's not as convenient, let's say, as like, over here on the, like the FAFSA, I have the FAFSA up right now. Like this FAFSA has like you can get all the different questions.
You
and
can get a
all the-
PDF of the FAFSA, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's not as convenient as that because they don't do a paper form, whereas the FAFSA actually they do accept a paper FAFSA if students are unable to complete it online, believe it or not. So it's not going to be that, but it does get you somewhere in between so you can have an idea as to what you'll have to file. Okay, so the main differences here, I've kind of laid out here. First of all, let me reiterate that for fall of 2025 start time. So if for students who are seniors in high school right now, if you're entering college in the fall of 2025, you're filling out the profile October 1 or later, whenever look at the deadlines the school is requiring. And you're filling out the FAFSA December 1 or later. You're going to be using 2023 income for both of the forms. There are certain types of families based on income that are not going to end up having to report assets at all on the FAFSA. But on the CSS profile, you're going to have to complete everything regardless. Like there isn't any kind of, there isn't the same kind of skip logic that's built into the FAFSA that'll say, okay, if you're in this income group, then automatically we're not going to ask for any asset information. The CSS profile doesn't do that. So you will have to file, there is skip logic in there for sure, but it is still going to ask you for all the income and assets of both the parents and the student. And so, keep that in mind. On the FAFSA this year, your family size is going to be the number of exemptions that comes in from your tax return, whereas the CSS profile will actually look at the actual number in the family and the number in college. So let's say, for example, that, grandma lives with you and, or maybe how about, let's say, you're, I don't know, a 25-year-old, sibling of the student came back to live at home, but is filing his or her own tax return. So they're not on your tax return anymore. On the FAFSA, there could potentially be a difference between what your family size is on the one form versus another form. So just that kind of was a change that happened this year. So the FAFSA pulls in from your tax return. The CSS profile is a little bit more accurate in terms of how many mouths are you feeding and who's sleeping in your house. And because that's essentially you're taking care of more people. So it's actually, helping you in the formula on the profile application.
Kat, can you just maybe, because there's been a few questions and kind of as while we're still on this line, explain about the number in asking about the number of students who are in college and how what FAFSA used to do with it, what they're not doing in it, and are CSS schools doing anything with that information?
Okay. Yes, very important. So the FAFSA this year, the form does ask how many are in college. However, the formula changed in terms of, you remember back here when I showed you this, the cost minus student aid index. So the student aid index this year meaning like the one we're sitting in right now, like your senior year of high school, those students who are in college right now are experiencing this new change. The student aid index no longer takes into account number in college in the formula. So even though the FAFSA asks for how many people are in college, the formula to figure out the SAI does not when it relates to like your eligibility for federal aid. And I'm not a fan of them removing that necessarily, but they did that. It was, and so on the FAFSA right now, technically, if you have two in college at the same time, your contribution at CSS profile schools is actually going to take that into account versus the FAFSA is not. So again, at profile schools, you may end up.
Do all profile schools like consider it, or they're just asking and some actually use the information and some may not?
So anecdotally speaking, from my last, I don't know, 10 months talking about this with some profile schools, because I know a lot of them, people in financial aid at those schools, they still were taking into account multiple kids in college at the same time. And they may, or it'll depend in terms of what they want to do in 25, 26 that year. But I think in general, a lot of the profile schools were using multiple kids in college in their formula, because there's two different formulas here. One is on the FAFSA. That's a formula that calculates that SAI. There's another formula that the College Board created related to the profile data that comes in, and they're not the same formulas. So the College Board formula is really, like, if you think of it this way on this chart, the FAFSA really is meant to figure out how much federal aid can I get, how much, and actually also state aid from your states. That is really like the numbers that has to be used to calculate federal and state financial aid. On the right-hand side here, however, the profile really is meant to figure out how much of the college's money they can give you. And so there's a lot more flexibility in that sense, because it's not a cookie cutter formula like the one on the left. It's a little bit more generous, but it does take into account a lot more information. So it's like, on one hand, it's looking at more stuff, but it is a very fair formula, quite frankly. And that number in college really was a doozy of a change this year, because when that came out that was going to be removed on the FAFSA application formula, if you will, a lot of people have been worried, really, families have been worried about that since the beginning of that news. And the colleges too, quite honestly, because they don't want families to be hurt by a formula, either. They want the students to come to school and, be in their classes. So anyway, it's been kind of a lot going on with that this year, but just, I would say in general, you should ask, put this on your to-do list tonight. When you get down the line of applying to each of the colleges you're looking at, if they need the profile application, ask them, do you take into account the fact that I have 2 or 3 kids in college at the same time? And they'll tell you, what their current policy is on that. But this year, I think a lot of the schools that use profile did use number in college and helped the students who were applying with that. Anything else, Debbie, on the number in college?
Nope, I think that was helpful.
Yeah, put it on your to-do list to ask that question if you are a family with more than one. And I think, you'll find that the schools are willing to work with you. If you're only applying to FAFSA schools, the ones that don't need the profile, then they will not globally do number in college they're not going to do, you would have to appeal for more financial aid in order for them to even take that into account, just so you know. Okay, taxable income from the tax return comes in on the FAFSA. It's going to automatically load in. On the profile, you will have to enter it from your tax returns. And then some of the untaxed income, it was excluded now for the FAFSA. So that's why I put certain untaxed income, because here's an example. If you are saving towards your retirement by way of having like a 401k or a 403b, et cetera, that used to be included on your FAFSA as untaxed income, but as of the current year we're sitting in right now, they no longer ask for that. Whereas on the profile application, you will have to report that. So again, if you put money back for your in your 401k this year, it will, or not this year, but for 2023, excuse me, you will have to include that as part of your income. And so that was a big change with the FAFSA, that's not included anymore. And then cash savings checking is pretty much standard for both of the forms. The real estate and investment net worth is also similar. So when I say real estate and investments, those are things like if you own other properties, not a business or a farm, but let's say you own like, 3 rental homes and you rent them out. Those have to be included on both forms equally. There's really no difference there between the two forms on that line item you see there. But as I move down the line here, 529 plans, so that did change for 23-24, and you no longer on the FAFSA have to include it for the siblings of the student who's applying to college, but on the profile you do still have to report it. So any 529 plans that the parent has saved for anyone in that household would have to be counted on the profile, but the FAFSA is just for the student who is applying on that FAFSA application. Business net worth is basically how much, if you are a business owner, if you're any size business, you now have to report that on both the FAFSA and the profile, regardless of the number of employees that you have. It used to be different. Now it's equal. You have to report it regardless of which form we're talking about here. So if you were to sell your business today, if you have buildings or, property, or you have inventory, things like that, like if you were to sell your business today, what's the net worth and minus how much do you owe on it equals, kind of what they will consider net equity essentially. And then lastly, I'm on the left, I'm coming down to farm equity. So it used to be that you didn't have to report all farms on the FAFSA, but now you do, even if it's like your primary residence or your primary, like you have a working farm maybe with animals and whatnot, or crops. If that was kind of like your farm is like where you live, then you didn't have to do it before, but now it's basically you have to report farm equity regardless of whether it's like your primary living arrangements, or if you happen to have like a soybean farm down the road or a horse farm, next door or whatnot. It doesn't matter. All the farm equity goes into the applications on both the profile and the FAFSA these days. So as of the current year we're sitting in. And then home equity, there's a couple other nuances that are included on the profile that you will not see on the left under the FAFSA, and that is home equity, retirement value, and special circumstances. So home equity is basically come up with the market value of your home today. You don't have to get like an assessment done or anything like that. Just use your best judgment as to, if I were to sell my home today in the town that I live in, based on the market around me, what would the home be worth? And then the equity is essentially, okay, take the value minus the debt against it. Maybe you have a home equity loan and a mortgage. You'll add those together because those are both debt against the home. And you'll subtract that from the value, and that's really what the equity that's going to be used within the formula for the profile.
Kat, somebody just asked, how is a HELOC actually like used in,
Oh, well, the home equity. So if you have a home equity loan, then that means you have more debt than just the mortgage. So that's why I say make sure that you add the HELOCs to your mortgage, because those are both technically bundled as debt against your home. And let me just tell you how the profile schools use this data. So basically, they look at home equity in the sense that because you own a home versus being a renter, you are at more of an advantage than someone who, who's just renting, basically. But when they look at home equity, they want to take into account the value, but also all the debt you have against it. Because it's like, well, that's not really, you can't borrow against all that debt level in between. So they just kind of want to look at the bottom line of your value minus the debt, and the debt includes the HELOCs, the home equity loans or home equity lines of credit. So that is counted. You should add that to how much you owe on the home to come up with your home debt. So in other words, it helps you to include that in the form. So also, I would like to say that each college and university that uses the profile will use home equity in different ways. Some of them use it like kind of a full shot, value minus debt equals equity. They use the equity in the formula as is. And then some schools will only use it fractionally. They may not use it to the full level of the debt that is calculated. So it could definitely vary by school. So if you want to know more about it, you can put that on your to-do list tonight as well, to ask the schools, how do you look at home equity? How do you treat that? And if they may tell you, they may not tell you the specifics, but they might. It just depends. But they definitely might treat it differently than another school down the road that's using the profile. So it's not a cookie cutter, way that they use it.
Kat, I apologize because I was answering questions. I don't know if you fully explained it, because somebody's asking about how do you determine the business net worth?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, like let's say that you are, selling, like you're making, I don't know that you're making a product and you're selling it, and all you do is you have like, I don't really know, trying to think here. I'm trying to think of something. Let's just say you make clothes or something, and then you sell them, and you have like your small business, and it's like you don't own a building that's extra for it. You just have the stock of things that you're using to make that item, and then you're selling them. Maybe you have like a pop-up shop, in your town. And so you don't own a building. You're just going to these pop-up shops and you're selling your stuff. So that's, the net worth of that type of business is honestly, it is not, it's really just the products that or the supplies that you have that you're using to make those goods. Whereas let's say you own a mini mart and you're the sole owner of like a store with a physical building, and you have vehicles, or let's say my brother-in-law owns a funeral home. He's a funeral director. He has a funeral home. He has another building. He has multiple cars because of the transportation of having to pick up people and transport people around and stuff like that. So his business net worth would be to take into account all those buildings and those cars and things like that. and subtract from it, what does he owe on his business? So that is a lot, that takes a lot more time to calculate or figure out like what your net worth is versus that other example where it's like, okay, I'm making some stuff. I go do a pop-up shop and I don't really own anything beyond the supplies that I have. So does that help?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Also, if you own a business, you know, with someone too, like you're just going to take into account the percentage of the business that you own. Like if you own half, you know, 50% or something like that, just take that into account as well. Like if you're, you know, if you're in business with someone, something like that, just make sure you're using your percentage. Retirement value. So the profile does ask a question about retirement value. I actually don't know if it's a required question this coming year, but it wasn't in the past. So it was, you know, you put down your retirement value. It's not actually part of the calculation, but it does help the schools to, if let's say they may or may not use it. I just want you to know that like a lot of schools don't use the field that comes in, but if you are, let's say you get your financial aid award and you're concerned with the bottom line of it, and you make a call to the school and you ask them to reconsider your financial aid offer. And they say, okay, well, we want you to put something in writing and tell us more about your circumstances and things like that. You know, etc. If they see that, you know, someone has a retirement value of, you know, $1 million versus someone else who's appealing for more financial aid and has a retirement value of $50,000, they probably will look at the person with the retirement value that's, you know, who hasn't been able to save as much, when they're, you know, determining like if they only have limited appeal funding to give at that stage, they may take that into account. But I really honestly feel like you shouldn't panic about that field, because just again, anecdotally from over the years, just, you know, schools, there's probably more schools that don't use this field than those that do. So regardless, it is not in the calculation in that formula for the profile application. So it's not going to calculate as part of your basic family contribution. I will tell you that for sure. The FAFSA doesn't ask for that, and the FAFSA doesn't ask for the home. And then lastly, the FAFSA does not ask for special circumstances. And that's the last row on here. And basically, this is essentially a way for you to tell your story. If you have any, you know, if you have any special circumstances, like we're taking care of grandma, or, you know, she's in assisted living and we have to help because it's so ridiculously expensive to live in a retirement home. So we're having to help, and here's how much we're putting out every month to help for that type of thing. Or maybe it's more medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance and that type of thing. So you do get a chance to put up to 2,000, you can write up to 2,000 characters and tell your story. So please do that if you have something that's not, you know, that you want to make sure you get across. The FAFSA does not have that capability. They don't have that on their form, but you could still tell your story, but you would have to do it in a separate letter, by, you know, you could email them or upload a letter, however they do their appeals at each school. You can tell your story, but the convenience is that the profile actually has it right there as part of the form. Okay, so any questions on the two? I like to spend some time on this slide because this is kind of where, like I said, the rubber meets the road on the fields that are asked for. Okay, so here's the calculation of need and the gap. So I'm using a cost of attendance of 75,000. minus the SAI is coming from the FAFSA application. And let's say that contribution came out to $35,000, that the Department of Education says, okay, you can contribute $35,000 towards college for this student. So the calculated financial need is 40,000. So it's 75 minus 35 equals 40. When a school is figuring out how much financial aid they can offer you, however, they're going to take that cost of attendance, and they may not be able to meet your full need of 40,000. So they may only offer you a fraction of that. Let's say in this example, they are offering you 25,000. Your actual family contribution or gap is 50. So whereas in this calculation, you know, your calculated contribution was 35,000. Unfortunately, the school couldn't make up all that, you know, the need of your, you know, and so they left a little bit more of a gap there for you. There are schools that can meet full need. So in fact, some of the CSS profile schools are the ones that can meet full need because they have more available to spend. So, you know, please don't count yourself out of applying to high cost private institutions. I'm not sure if any of you saw this article this a couple of months ago, but they did there was an article that basically kind of named a group of colleges that had gone over the $90,000 sticker price mark.
Yeah.
And so you may or may not have seen that. You can Google it if you want.
I think it was the New York Times. Yeah.
Yeah. And essentially the thing about it is some of the schools on that list are like, you know, they're good schools. And a lot of them are like, maybe all of them, I don't remember now, but like a lot of them use the profile. Because a lot of them are like some of the most generous ones in terms of how much they can offer. Some of them don't even put loans in your financial aid offer. They're really heavily putting grants in there and scholarships. So it's like, you can't count yourself out on a sticker price, like you would with like a car. Cause you know, if I walk up to a car and it's $100,000, I can't afford, I'm not going to go buy that car. And there's not like all this stuff that happens to bring that price down for me. Whereas when you're shopping for a college, there is like, that's what this whole thing is about. The calculation of need, how much your family can afford to pay. And then also looking at merit or talent-based academic types of scholarships as well. And that's bringing your price down. So, you know, a lot of people really just don't pay the sticker price. And so this whole conversation tonight is just to know that, honestly, the sticker price is important, but I would just apply if it's a good fit for the student emotionally, financially, or excuse me, emotionally, academically, socially, all those things. And they've got the programs that they're looking for and all that, and it's a good fit. Otherwise, give it a try. The worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work out financially, and then you have to go with one of the other choices on the list. But you know, I'm just saying from experience.
But to be fair, people should do the net price calculator because it will give you a sense of like if you're, you know, if you're in the range. It's not an exact amount, but you know, it's a ballpark.
Right. So every college and university is required to have a net price calculator on their website. Probably will take you only a couple clicks to find it. You can even just Google net price calculator, you know, XYZ college, and you'll just get right to it. It's either going to be on the financial aid pages or the admissions pages or both, but it is required to be there if they participate in the federal aid programs. So get in there, you know, plug in of some high level stuff. You're not going to have to, it's not like filing a FAFSA or a profile. It's high level stuff. You're putting it in there and you're getting a sense as to what their financial aid offers might look like. So yeah, definitely put that one on your to-do list for tonight as well. So,
Honestly, I would create a spreadsheet for each school that your student is very serious about and is going to apply to, do their net price calculator and just save that information.
yeah, good suggestion. Okay, covered that already. All right, so I talked about this already a little bit, but the special circumstances, some other examples might be for sure job loss or pay reduction. So especially like during COVID, any kind of recession timeframes, you know, like COVID definitely produced this problem because a lot of people, you know, had job, you know, issues, loss, either job loss or salary reductions because they had to get another job and they're not making as much as the previous job and those sorts of things. So anything that is unique that you didn't feel like it was asked for on the application as a data element, just, you know, put it in the special circumstances section. Again, you get 2,000 characters to write your story. And if you need more space, you can always find out how the school wants to receive your information beyond that. Consumer debt is not typically considered, but I mean, that's not to say that they couldn't look at it. So if you have something unique, you know, certainly you could tell your story there. I mean, I guess I guess I'm just throwing this out there, like, I don't know, maybe you had you know, a tornado in your home,
Yeah,
in
that's
your
what I was gonna say,
area,
some disaster, even with your
a
home
disaster.
that you
Yep,
had to, yeah.
and your insurance company wouldn't cover everything, and you had to take on some expenses through credit cards or something, you know, that would be a story I would want to tell them. You know, it's not like, you know, I've been out shopping for new shoes, you know, it's not that. So okay, and then so basically for divorced or separated families, or for those folks who maybe were never married or that type of thing, let me go through who has to put what on the profile. Okay, so if parents are married, hands down, you have to put both parents' data on the profile and the FAFSA. If the parents are divorced, separated, or they were never married, and they're not remarried at this time, it's going to be the parent who provides greater than half the support that goes on the profile in the FAFSA, and they're considered the primary custodial parent. There are some profile schools that may want the other biological parent to complete a completely separate CSS profile application. And you saw back when I had that, I went onto the website and I showed you the non-custodial profile column, which was the second from the right. That's what I'm talking about there. So if they want the other biological parent to do the profile, it's going to say yes in that column on that website, the profile website.
Okay, and before you go further, Kat, because there are some questions about this. Well, somebody asked, what if they're divorced and the other biological parent just refuses to fill out that form?
Okay, great
What
question.
can they do?
Yes, that's a great question. So every school that uses has a requires the non-custodial parent to fill out the profile, they have a waiver process. They all have it. Because there are going to be examples of this. And when I worked in financial aid at the two schools I worked at, we used the profile, we used the non-custodial profile and all that stuff. And we, of course, had a waiver process. And so they could be examples like that person is unwilling to fill it out. The other types of examples could vary. Like, you know, I literally haven't had contact with this person for 18 years. It could be an abusive situation. It runs the gamut, basically, in terms of what that means. And so here's my advice on that. So if you go back to the profile website, there is a section on this. And here it is. So under divorced or separated families, you can go under learn more. And what if I do not have contact with my non-custodial parent here on the right? And the College Board actually created a waiver form that a lot of schools will just use, they'll allow this form to come in. Some of them have their own form, but this form is here for you to see kind of the fields that are requested. And sometimes they might even just take this form, like you don't actually have to fill out the school's separate form. But this will kind of give you a sense as to, the types of waiver requests. You can see here where it says types of waiver requests that are usually not considered if a parent refuses. This gets controversial sometimes, and I could, talk about this one for a while, but so some colleges will be a little bit more stringent on offering you a waiver versus others. Even if they do let you waive it, they may still count a contribution from that other person. It just depends. It honestly just depends.
So it's just because you're filling out this form doesn't mean it's going to be an automatic, okay, sure,
correct.
We'll waive it.
That's right. In fact, I mean, they're going to require you to turn in documentation on here too. So you can do like, here's at the end, it shows like copy of a police report or a restraining order, third-party documentation. You might have to get a letter from people who know you well, like clergy, certainly, other family members. Those resonated with us when I was, honestly, I've reviewed hundreds of these requests over my career. The people who know you best are the best ones to write it. And like if it's, pick people who basically understand the family dynamic. Like if it's someone like a teacher who from high school who doesn't really know much about the family situation, I probably wouldn't pick the teacher. I would much prefer someone who has firsthand knowledge of why you're not in contact with that person, or that person is not able to fill this thing out. And you're gonna make out better when you have that kind of third-party documentation. Just saying from my experience.
So Kat, just while we're talking about divorce, that's a very good question about what information, like if both parents are filling it out and they're divorced, is the potential that either one can see the other person's finances?
No, 100% no. Because they fill out they each have their own login. So never the two shall meet. 100% sure of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when the College Board built this, that was always something they were talking about. I mean, they in fact, when they redesigned their forms, I was working there at the time, actually, at the last time they revised their, kind of how this flow worked. And that was always something that the integrity of that always had to remain, which was never the two shall meet. For one reason, it's personal information. It's not even, they're not in the same household. So like that would just be a no right from the get-go. So no, they get their own login, whereas the student who's like the parent who's actually on the profile application can use the student's login to complete it. Whereas the other biological parent who's completing it on their own has to create their own user ID and that type of thing. Any other questions, Debbie, right there?
Not yet. I mean, I know there's one more bullet point on this page.
Okay. So this is the last group, which is, okay, parents are divorced, separated, never married, but they did get remarried. So they are remarried at this time. They will need to put the parent who provides greater than half the support and the step parent. So now, because now there's a step parent. So the step parent definitely goes on both the FAFSA and the profile. So, so let me summarize this here. The first bullet is if the parents are married, both parents' data goes on FAFSA and profile. I'm going to go to the third bullet. If the parents are, split up at some point, but they're remarried now, it's going to be the, two parents are going on both of those forms. The middle bullet is the one where it gets, it depends. It depends if the school even needs that other biological parent to fill something out. So it, I will say this though, there are some schools, I just remembered this, that will, even though, like if I'm going to the third bullet here where you're remarried. So you've got a parent and a step parent on the FAFSA and the profile. Some of these profile schools will want you to also have the other biological parent complete a profile. So if you're counting, that's 3 parents that are potentially having to fill out something here, and possibly 4
if that other parent is remarried, if both parents are remarried.
Yes. So
so not to get involved in people's love life, but quite honestly, one of the things we recommend is not to get remarried until your kids are done with college. I hate to say.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's, I have a friend from college who got remarried. Like she's an emergency room doctor and, does okay. And, her spouse, doesn't make as much as her. And they each had 2 children. And now they're, all rolling into college. And unfortunately, all of her data has to go on the forms for some of these schools that require the profile. So it's unfortunate, but they're happily married. So I'm happy for her. But but they definitely are spending a little bit more here on college. So I don't know if there's other questions, let me know, but this always brings up a lot of questions. So, worst case scenario is you'd have to have 4 parents' data on the forms, but honestly, even if schools do need that, they're not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take a calculation from 4 people. They might split it up in some other way. So I don't want you to panic about that. And quite frankly, if you are in this situation where you were divorced and you're remarried now, and the schools you're looking at are on that list that need it, put it on your to-do list to ask them how they treat it, and you'll know more about it, because it will be school by school in terms of how they treat that information. So
here's a question. It's a little indicative of a few questions I've gotten here about who should fill out the form. This parent is saying that they are the primary parent where the student lives, but the student's father, they're divorced, pays the parent child support. So he's technically the one who provides more financial support. Just to confirm, just because the student lives with one parent, if the other parent is providing more financial support, it is truly the parent who provides more financial support who fills out the forms. It doesn't matter where they live, where the student lives.
That is correct. So the way that you have to approach this is, greater than half support. I haven't, and that goes for the FAFSA too. Like in terms of, filling out the FAFSA too, but with the FAFSA, you're not getting into all this extra stuff here with having to fill out a second profile application and all that stuff. That's only for the profile schools that, I will say this though, there is a nuance in the sense that I've spoken with a lot of families who have equal support. They're like, well, we have 50-50. We, everybody, they're here 3 nights a week, and then they go there 3 nights a week, and then that we rotate that Sunday or whatever. And so it's like equal stuff, and everything is pretty equal across the board. If you are in that situation, the new rules on the FAFSA, this actually is FAFSA is the one that muddied the waters on this, in this new FAFSA year, is you have to, again, 50-50 situation going on. You have to report the parent who has more income and assets. It's actually written in the instructions. So didn't really used to be that way because it kind of had to do with where they lived. But now it's like driven by who's giving you greater than half support. And if it's 50-50 support, then it's the parent who has more income and assets. That's who's supposed to go on both forms. So I'm just the messenger.
Right.
So let me go into some frequently asked questions, and some of these, we may have, I don't know if we've covered some of these already, but I think we're rounding third here. Okay, so I don't think I'll qualify for aid. Should I fill it out? The answer is yes. And now, so if there's some people who think they make too much money and they don't think they'll qualify for aid, and then there's some people who think they don't make enough money, so they're not going to qualify for aid. So there's like people on both ends of the spectrum, and then there's the middle class who sits in the middle there sometimes, and sometimes think they won't qualify for aid, but they really will. Keep in mind that the profile schools that you're going to see on this list have fairly high costs of attendance. So when you're, there's mostly private schools on there, but there are some flagship publics on there too, like the University of Michigan and UNC Chapel Hill and UVA and in Virginia, and schools that have a really high ticket price. So when it's all relative, it's like, if you're thinking that your contribution is going to be too high, it's like, well, but if the cost of attendance is high, I showed you that formula, a higher cost of attendance minus a family contribution still might leave room at the bottom to give you some money. Whereas if you're applying to a lower cost institution minus a big, a family contribution, maybe you won't qualify for aid at that lower cost institution. So it really is all relative based on the cost of attendance and stuff. So, and also keeping in mind, if you have more than one kid in college at the same time, the profile schools might be taking into account those multiple kids in college, whereas the FAFSA is not. So, and the FAFSA, or the profile is also looking at all that extra stuff, which might, your contribution, your family contribution could go up or down based on the form, based on like if you had medical expenses, or you're supporting more family members outside of the household, or just special circumstances. So yes, I would fill it out, especially if you think you're going to qualify for a fee waiver. If you have an AGI of less than $100,000 in 2023, there's no harm, no foul. You might as well fill it out. I realize it does take time to sit down and fill it out. So, I mean, there is that's sort of the painstaking part. But if it means that you could end up with thousands of dollars, wasn't that hour worth it? I mean, that's what, honestly, the answer is yes. Yeah. So,
So,
and do you
sorry,
yeah.
just a quick question, Kat, just to confirm, I mean, we asked this question relative to parent information, but is there any way that the child can see any of the financial information that parents might submit on the CSS profile?
So technically, yes, because they're using the same login for the student. So if the student logs in there's a dashboard, and I think they can see it. So
I think so too. I just wanted to confirm. Yeah.
I think that's still a thing. If it's the non-custodial parent, then 100% no, they can't see it. But the student and that household they're all going to see that same dashboard. So
okay, and then related to this kind of question about who can see what, a parent is asking, I'm assuming they're thinking that basically they're saying, what if the other divorced parent calls and wants to review like the the financial aid award or tries to appeal it, will the school give them a copy of the full information that's on the profile? I think
Definitely.
schools are very careful about this.
Schools are very careful. In fact, there's a federal law about it called
Yeah.
FERPA,
Yeah.
which basically means that they're not allowed to speak with
They're not even allowed to
certain,
speak with you until.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it means that, you know, now that the student is 18, like they can't even talk to you about it without
Unless
getting the
it-
student's
right.
permission about
Right.
certain things, you know, on the campus. So no, I think the schools are for sure not going to share any of that information with the non-custodial parent. I mean, you know, here's the thing, you know, I guess there's always room for someone to make a mistake, like if they thought they were talking to the right parent, but I would highly doubt that that would happen. They're very careful. So financial aid people are very they're very big on rules because they're dealing
There's
with
a lot
federal
of rules.
regulations
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And so compliance is like their number one thing. And so they're very careful.
So just to confirm, and a parent's asking, in a divorce situation, the student needs an account on the CSS profile, the parent filling it out, and then also the non-custodial parent.
Well, that's not correct.
Okay.
So technically the student may already have a College Board login if they did the SAT or the PSAT or AP exams. So whatever that login is, that's the login that the custodial parent can use.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the non-custodial parent is definitely a second login for sure.
Okay. So there's basically at most 2 logins.
Yep.
And most likely just one if it's there's no divorce situation.
That's right. Yep. And I did confirm that with a College Board colleague of mine a week ago, just to make sure to prepare for this call. So do I need to complete both FAFSA and the profile? FAFSA always. The profile is only for those like 265 schools, and there's a handful of scholarship organizations that need the profile as well in that listing. But it was 263, I think, that use the profile. So FAFSA for every school, almost. The profile for just that subset. Under whose email address do I log in and submit the profile? So basically just be careful when you're filing the profile that and I actually noticed that the instructions say this, like make sure that you're filling out, if something is asking for the student's name or email or etc., make sure that even if the parent is sitting there filling out some of this stuff, that you're not thinking to yourself like, oh, me? Okay, this is my information and I'm typing it in. I guess they really have had a lot of families where the parent is helping, they're doing the data entry and they're answering the questions for themselves. But if it's specifically asking what, you know, students, I'm just going to say student's name or email or whatever, make sure that you're answering it per that. Because in the end, you could accidentally misreport something that has a financial impact. So just make sure that you're, you know, careful when you're reading. So, but the email address is going to be, I think that's in reference to the question we wrote here was in reference to the login. So just you're using the student to initiate this application by using their College Board login, which is tied to their email address. But the parent's email address is a field as well. What is the deadline? So the deadline for submitting the CSS profile is going to vary by school. So if you're applying via early decision in an early decision program, it basically means that you're applying probably your due date for financial aid to those schools and admissions to those schools is going to be like November 1st or November 15th. Those are the common deadlines for early decision. An early decision is just like, if you're really sure where you want to go to college and you've got one choice school, you want to go there. And if you get in and get your financial aid, you're going there. That's for those examples. So usually they're November 1, November 15th, maybe December 1st for those groups or for that group. Regular decision is the majority of people do regular decision, and that's really like has more of a February-ish deadline. So you'll want to check the school's websites to see exactly what the date is, but sometimes they're like February 1st, February 15th. Those are typical deadlines for regular decision. And then there's a third group called early action, which is like, okay, you're applying early, but you're applying to multiple schools. It's not like this one school you're applying to. And they will also have earlier deadlines than the February timeframe. So just check each school, make your spreadsheet that has, information or about each of the schools, their deadlines, plug in some, information you got after you did the net price calculators for each of those, like Debbie suggested earlier. And the deadlines are important because there's some schools that really are adamant about it. Some aren't as adamant. They'll let you apply a little late, but don't assume that anybody's going to let you apply late. If there's a deadline there, it's there for a reason. And they for sure will be giving priority for free money, grant money to those folks who meet the deadlines for sure. Unfortunately, you do have to fill out the profile every year, but you have to fill out the FAFSA every year too. So don't have any good news on that one, but it'll be easier the second year because it does pre-fill data for you related to the FAFSA and the profile as well.
So, Kat, there was a question about if you have multiple students, and you have to fill out the profile. Any efficient way of doing it, like, can you copy information?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I thought I would just ask.
Unfortunately, same thing on the FAFSA too. It's like they're two separate applications. Trying to think if the FAFSA improved that this year. I'm blanking on that to see if I can't remember if they made an improvement on that. Like if you do have multiples, but I really think it really is like they're separate applications. And the main reason is because the students are different. But even though the parent information is the same, so I know it's a little frustrating, but okay, do all schools have the same question? So the profile itself will be a base, it'll have the same overall questions, and skip logic will be the same whether you're applying, because when you're applying on the profile, you're basically adding schools at the end of the application. You're saying, okay, I want you to send the data to Syracuse University, University of Rochester, Amherst College, and Stanford. So those are all profile schools. So you're picking those schools at the end, and all four of those are going to get all of the data that you filed. There are some nuances to that though, and that is that schools have the opportunity to add on some additional, what they call supplemental questions. So there could be 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5 questions that were, maybe Boston College wanted that Villanova didn't need. So in that sense, Villanova won't get the answers to it, but Boston College would, because they paid extra basically to ask you a couple more things. That's really what that means. But the base profile, all the schools are gonna, get the same data unless they paid extra to get supplemental questions on the form for you. So, but you'll know who's asking because it'll say which ones needed which ones, I think. 2023 is the income you're using, but the assets are going to be as of present day when you're filing the form. And that goes for the profile and the FAFSA too. So income from 2023 will be used. Assets present day, the day you're filing the forms. How do I determine the value of my house? Well, I mean, you could go to Zillow.com and you could plug in your address and see, you know, what your home is listed that on there, to give you a starting point. Alternatively, you could kind of, you know, maybe if other homes have sold in your neighborhood, and you kind of know the range that they were in when they sold, you can kind of base it on that as your average. But I really don't think you need to go pay for an appraisal because that actually doesn't end up necessarily matching what your house would be technically on the market for anyway, if you put your house on for sale that day. But it's just use your best judgment. But you could start with Zillow and you know, your neighborhood prices. How do I add additional schools to send the profile? So like I said, you could add if you are sitting down doing your profile, you can put schools on that night and then submit it. And then if you decide you wanted to add some, you just go back into your dashboard that you're going to see, and you're just going to add schools. It's actually very easy. And if you had a fee waiver, it'll be for all the schools that you add. Like, it's not, if you get a fee waiver, then you're actually getting it for however many you want to send it to. So if you're not qualifying for a fee waiver, then you would have to pay an additional $16 for each additional school. So again, it's $25 for one and $16 per additional school. So, but if your AGI is less than $100,000 from 2023, you won't have to pay for any of them. You can save a draft, and you can, you do not have to do the profile all in one sitting. So if you want to do a little bit at a time over the course of a week, go for it. You know, even though it becomes available on October 1, you do not have to do the profile on October 1. Please don't even remotely think that. Just all you have to do is adhere to the college's deadlines for when they want it. You have to submit it by midnight Eastern time of the deadline that the school had. Like, so if they say they want it, you know, November 1 or February 1, then you need to submit it by midnight Eastern time. No, you know, whatever that day was, whatever the deadline is. So, but you can save a draft and come back in. And then at the end, you can also print out, like, once you've submitted it, you can also print out like a whole compilation of everything that you filed, like a profile summary. So you'll also be able to see that in your dashboard as well. And then you can correct mistakes. So they didn't used to have that. So they do allow you to go back in and make corrections. I don't know if it was that they limited that at first. I'm not sure if they allow every single data element to be corrected. So, you know, but it's worst case scenario. If there's something that you're not able to correct, but it is a vital piece of the puzzle, then you can always communicate with the colleges and say, oh, I wasn't able to make this change, but I want to make sure that you know that I made this mistake on my profile. So, but I do know that you can make corrections now to the profile. And that was the end of the kind of the prepared stuff. And then Debbie, if there are additional questions, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you, Kat, as always. Ton of information. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. A few quick questions. Let me scroll through, but one that I remember off the bat, I was a little surprised. Somebody said that they've already filled out the CSS profile for a school, but how could that be the case since it's not October 1st yet? And are they filling out the correct form?
No, they're filling out incorrectly of the wrong year. Yeah. So, because the only thing available right now is 24-25 and 23-24. So they filled it out, but they will have to redo it for 25-26. Because I don't
So,
think the school will, because, well, I mean, you could check with the school to see, but I don't think they'll let you because it has to do with how they download the data into their system. And
so it's not going into the right systems that they're going to actually end up downloading.
it's going to go into the wrong school year. And
Yeah.
like, I don't think I just think 9 times out of, I think most schools are going to make you redo it.
Okay, so for that person who asked that, because I think you're still on the call, I would definitely call the college and confirm that you filled out the right form, because I was surprised too. They're just not open yet.
No, it's not open yet.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So
Yes, the good news is they have practice.
right.
Oh dear.
So we kind of skirted around this a little bit, but can you explain that? I mean, that there is a fee to submit the form, and how often do you have to pay the fee?
So every time you file so every year you would pay the fee. So if you, like I said, it's $25 for the first school and then $16 for each additional school. And that's, let's say that's for the 25-26 year. And then for 26, if the school needs it, sometimes didn't say this, but some colleges don't need this but once. They might not require you to do it every year. It depends on the school. I did not say that earlier, but like I used to work at schools where we required it every year, but one of those schools I know only does it for the freshmen now. So, but if you do have to file it year after year, you have to pay each year.
So somebody's saying that on the website, there is a link for 25-26 showing up. Let's see. Do you mind pulling it up, Kat?
I don't mind.
Yeah, they have this one.
Very strange, unless they're doing a soft launch. Which is possible, but this might be, I don't know. I worry about that because
I would definitely ask the college that you're filling this out for.
yeah, because if the College Board clearly, I see it. It's right there. I know
Yeah.
they're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's possible they're doing a soft launch and then they're working out any bugs. But I worry about the bugs. Yeah, I just wouldn't recommend you apply till October 1 because you're not going to get any advantage from
Right.
applying this early at all. Like the colleges aren't even going to look at your data anyway. They won't download any data until at the earliest October. And I feel like you should wait till the bugs get worked out, because if they're doing testing and like, what if something gets fixed and your stuff went in and was working against you with the bug? You know what I mean? I just feel like, I think this is I'm so glad the person said that.
Yeah.
But my hunch is a soft launch means working out the bugs because October 1 is not here and no one is advertising that you can do this yet. So I would safely wait till October 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
was my opinion for it, but I'm so appreciative that person said that.
Yeah.
But what are we, let's see, we're at the 19th of September, so yeah, I guess I don't know.
Okay, so somebody asked, this is earlier, which is I thought was a good question, about how are all these forms connected, like the Students Common App, the FAFSA, the CSS profile, meaning when the college gets all this, how do they know like that, like this is the same student from the Common App and the CSS profile and the FAFSA? What are they using to connect it?
Well, they're mainly using social security number. But what happens at some schools, depending upon what system that they use, sometimes for privacy reasons, they don't necessarily like to rely on social security numbers anymore. So they are assigning student IDs to student applicants. So like a lot of stuff is driven, once it comes in, it's definitely starts with a social security number. Unless, you know, it's an undocumented student who doesn't have a social security number. You know, like that's a nuance, I guess we don't have to talk about here, but like social security number is, you know, is going to get loaded in from the different forms matched up, but it ultimately they're getting assigned student IDs too. So it's,
Well, so the other reason the person was asking, wondering if the same email address has to be used, like the student, does the same student's email address have to be used on the Common App, on the CSS profile, FAFSA?
I mean,
Probably makes sense. I don't know.
I would
100%.
probably recommend it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny though. I mean, there's a,
And sorry, and don't use your students' like high school email address
yeah, I wouldn't do that.
because you might lose access to it.
You know, some people have multiple email addresses, like they've got a Gmail and then they've got, you know, they've got a couple Gmail ones because they want to use it for different reasons, you know. I mean, I don't, you know, so I would just say try to be maybe try to be consistent with the email addresses. If they didn't, I don't think it's the end of the world, because I don't think that's necessarily it's not the main identifier all the time. So but it would help you. It would help a school. Let's say, for example, that you had 1 digit off on your social security number that you put on the forms, and, you know, like they might start using other data to try to match you up. So having the same email address would help them in that example.
Right.
You know, to try to figure out like, oh, okay, this is why this is not loading to our system, because the social security number you put on the profile is 1 digit off from, you know, what came in through your Common App and your FAFSA, you know what I mean? So the matching email addresses would help them in that case. And then they would have to work with you to fix, you know, whatever's broken.
So somebody is asking, can they, I guess they want to jump the gun, can they fill out the CSS profile before the student applies?
Yep.
I mean, technically, yes. And
Yep.
then just, you know, I mean,
Sure.
and just make sure your student ends up applying to that school so you didn't waste your time, but.
And your money.
Right. That's true. And your money, more important.
If you didn't get a fee waiver.
Right.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. You can file the profile before you're done submitting the applications to the schools.
And there was another question, which I'll just include on the same line. Somebody asked, do I have to fill out the FAFSA before I do the CSS profile? Like, is there any particular order that needs to happen?
I mean, you've got 2 months of leg up on the profile versus the FAFSA anyway. So, you know, if you wanted to do the profile earlier, here's the one thing I would say about this. Filing them months apart won't matter when it comes to the income, because it's all going to be from 2023 anyway. But it will matter on the asset part. So like if you're about ready to buy a house and you got a down payment sitting in your assets, or you're about, you know, you're buying a car or something like that. So your assets, if they're going to significantly change, because you're supposed to file these forms with your assets on the day that you file them. So when many months pass, and if you have some major thing that's coming up, like, you know, you don't want to have your assets looking like really way a little wacky, but so I would maybe keep that in mind. But if your assets aren't really going to be that much different, then I wouldn't worry about it.
Somebody is asking, is there any basically accommodation for families that live in the higher cost of living areas?
On the profile, yes.
There is. So that's just kind of part of their calculation, the formula to some extent? Because it's not like they ask you, like, you know, I mean, they know where you live.
Yeah, so here's a fun fact. So the FAFSA this year actually stopped allowing within the formula like state taxes that you pay for wherever you live. So that actually was taken out. So that actually hurt people this year on the FAFSA. Whereas the profile not only takes into account state taxes, but it also looks at some schools, they look at cost of living adjustment factors. They call it a COLA factor, basically. And so they look at, like, if you're from San Francisco, well, I always like to use this example. If you're from Manhattan, New York versus Manhattan, Kansas, which is an actual place, like, your cost of living is way different. So some schools that are using that COLA factor are giving you a bigger break in the formula if you're coming from those areas. I know a lot of schools that use the profile really like that because it is more fair. You know, if you're living in DC, you know, or Boston or LA, or, you know, fill in the blank, they feel like they're being more fair to families at these profile schools because of that allowance. And the FAFSA just doesn't do that. And not only does it doesn't do that, it actually hurt you even more this year by taking out that state tax allowance. It doesn't even do that. So I don't know why they did that, but unfortunately it was part of the law. So
a question about if a family does fill out the CSS profile, are they obligated to fill out FAFSA? I mean, they don't have to. There's no connection between the two forms. You would expect that somebody who fills out the CSS profile would also fill out the FAFSA, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I think the schools would probably,
although they might kind of ask you to, or they might require, because they probably want to make sure that if you're eligible for government money, that you get that government money before they give you their institutional money.
Yeah, I mean, they might consider your file incomplete without doing the FAFSA 2. But, you know, if you, and I guess the reason why I'm hesitating is because I think it depends. Like, I think for the most part, schools are going to want you to do the FAFSA and the profile. Like, if you're, instead of just the profile, because they are also going to want to be able to offer you federal loans, which you're automatically going to qualify for. If you do the FAFSA, you automatically qualify for federal direct loans for the student. And so they're going to want to be able to offer you things that you have access to that could be, you know, relatively low cost means to borrow, or work study where the student can earn money on campus, or you know, a teach grant for students who are interested in going to teaching and they want to pursue and get a hold of that grant program. That's a federal program. So I don't know. I just feel like they're going to mostly consider your files incomplete if you haven't done it, but I suppose there's an exception to every rule. And you can always ask you know, you put it on your to-do list to ask the college, like, you know, hey, do I have to do the FAFSA too? Or
and let me just emphasize, because there's somebody made a comment in the chat about, you know, they had some questions that they wanted to ask financial aid, but somebody told them not to bother financial aid. And I wouldn't believe that, because I mean, you have questions, you need answers. This is a big purchase, and you should be afraid to ask the questions.
Yeah, I mean, so this year financial aid went through quite an ordeal with just the FAFSA debacle. There were just so many problems, and they were underwater. And so some of that advice may have come like during that time, because they were just buried in nonsense, in just the nonsense of the whole thing was just a mess. But in general, if you have a question, financial aid is there to answer your questions. And will they sit, like, you know, we're doing tonight on, you know, for 2 hours and talk to you? No, but they are there to help, and they, you know, they would much rather you ask the question up front and not do something that's just going to take you more time later to fix, or have to appeal later or something like that. You know, they'd rather you do it right the first time. So I would say my financial aid colleagues that I have had over all these years are ready and willing to take your call.
So last kind of question, because you've been so generous, Kat, with your knowledge and time, there were a few questions about pensions, and how does that fit into the calculations and the forms, if parents are getting pension payments?
If it's part of their income
Yes.
versus like an asset.
Yeah, well, maybe talk about both.
Yeah, so you know how I mentioned back here on this slide, how retirement value is required on the profile, but not on the FAFSA. So like if you have a pension that's sitting there, that's, think of it the same way as you've got an asset that will be available to you when you graduate, when you retire. Similar to people, well, it's not similar, but I mean, like, it is an asset, like a 401k is sitting there growing and getting, making its way towards my retirement. So you would count it as a retirement value in the value when you have it as sitting there as an asset, whatever it's worth today. That's what you would file it as in your assets. As I said, it's not in the calculation. But that's what you would do with the asset part. As it relates to, like, if you're actually getting income, you're already retired and you're getting retirement, you're getting pension money now, that would, like, if it's taxable pension money, I don't know, is it all untaxed, or is some of it taxed?
No, some of it could be taxed.
So yeah, some of it could be taxed. So if you had it in 2023 as taxable income, you'll list that as part of the second row down here on the right, under taxable income from the tax return. If you had any that was not taxed, you will list it as it relates to the third line down, which is untaxed income.
So either way, it's going to show up.
Either way, it's going to show up for 2023. And that is in the calculation. So if you got that as income in 23, then it will be part of your income, quite frankly, for both FAFSA and profile. But if you have retirement value as an asset, that's just profile.
Okay, and the absolute last question is probably only relates to a few people, but somebody did ask us this. What about tax liens? How are they incorporated if there's tax liens on your primary residence?
Tax lien on your primary resident, does that count as a, well, that's not a debt against it, or I mean, it's a debt against it, but like, is there, I guess if you have a dollar amount lien against your home, I would probably list that as debt. I think if I were you, I would probably double check. So here's the thing, I don't have access to, like, unless I'm filing the profile, I don't have access to, like, all the instructions for it. But I would say that, like, it'll say that in the instructions of the profile as to whether or not to include that. The other thing I can do is to ask my colleague from College Board if she can give me more info, and then I can give that answer to Debbie.
Yeah, so if the person who asked that, send me a message at support@rhodescollege.com. And Kat, if you don't mind, maybe following up, and then I can pass the information on.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I just don't want to give you the wrong information, but I think my best advice, obviously, is to, read the instructions when you get to it and see if you're supposed to include that as home debt. I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Okay, well, thank you, Kat, so much. Somebody kind of asked a little earlier on in the session, which I answered in the questions, when are we going to get to the actual form? And I was like, there's so much information to learn before we get to the form.
I know. I hope we finally got to their questions, and
Yeah, and I know, like we didn't actually pull up an actual form, but quite honestly, understanding everything we
Ah,
explained tonight will really help you when you do sit down and do the actual form and be prepared. So,
yes. And if not, they can listen to this recording and listen to it again.
correct.
See if it helps when they get to it.
Okay, everyone, it's been a long
Appreciate it.
night. I appreciate you, Kat, and College Ave for their support. And this is, you guys don't have to feel panicked or rushed. This is September 19th. So in the world of financial aid,
Mhm.
you still have a little time. I would make you start to feel a little panicked and rushed on your students' essays and college lists because I want to make sure that those are moving along. But you have a little bit more time on the financial aid side, but it will creep up quickly.
True. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Take care. Bye.